Okay, in this particular set of examples, we're going to be looking at two functions that we're going to have to evaluate by plugging in the number. And then after that, you're going to have to add them together. So if I'm looking at the first part, I notice that I have an H and I have a J. Now, in this particular situation, I have my input for the H is going to be 3, and I have my input for J is going to be 7. So I'm going to do each of these separately, and then once I have the answer, I can plug them in. So remember, the input that we're going to use here is actually, this is your X that you're going to plug in, and this is your X that you're going to plug in here. Whoops. For a J. So it's two separate functions, so we're going to do them separately. So again, I'm going to take where X is, and I'm going to input 3. So this is going to be 2 times 3 minus 4. Now, if you need to use Desmos for these, that's fine. Just make sure when you plug them in that you plug them in properly. So we have 2 times 3 minus 4 is going to give me 2. So I now know that my output here is 2. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the J function. So in J, I'm going to plug in 7 for X. Now, if I'm looking at this example, I need to talk, there is a negative in front that is not where X is. It's in front of X. Put that in, I'm going to be looking at negative, and then in parentheses, I'm going to put in 7, and I'm going to square that. So the only thing I take out is the X. Everything else around it is the same. And I'm going to type that just like I would in Desmos, the way that it is here. So this is going to be negative parentheses 7 squared, and that's plus 3. And with that, I get negative 46. So this is going to be negative 46 as my output. So now the final step is we're going to add these two things together. So we got to come down here and we got to add them together. So we're going to add 2 and negative 46. So if we add 2 and negative 46, we get negative 44 as my final answer here. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing. We just got to make sure that we are looking at the proper function. So if I'm looking at this one has an H. So this has an H here, and this one has a J. And then we're going to subtract the numbers when we're done. So if we're looking at H, we're going to plug in negative 2 for H. That's going to be my input. And we're going to plug in negative 3 for J. All right, so we're going to start with the H one, and we're going to say 2 times negative 2 minus 4. Just like this function right here, that's my H function, and we're plugging in 2 in that spot. Now, you can plug this right into Desmos if you want to, so you can say 2 times negative 2 plus 4, and that gives me, minus 4. And that's going to give me negative 8. So this equals negative 8 right here. Now we're going to do the same thing for J. Now remember, J has the negative in front and it's squared. So this is going to be negative, and this is going to be negative 3. So we're going to include the negative that's already there and the negative that we're plugging in and squaring it. Plus 3. Now, when you go to plug this into Desmos, you need to make sure you plug it in properly. There's a negative in front of parentheses and a negative inside the parentheses. So you're going to type it just like you have it. So negative parentheses, negative 3 squared, and the negative and the minus sign are interchangeable in Desmos. Plus 3, and we get out negative 6. Now, for the next part, we've got to subtract here. So we're going to go down and we're going to subtract these two. Okay, so we're going to say negative 8 minus negative 6. So negative 8 minus negative 6. And that's going to give me a final answer of negative 2. All right, and for this last one, so we have h of 2, so we're going to be plugging in, or excuse me, h of 7, so we're going to plug in 7. Then we have j of 2, which means we're going to plug in 2, and then we're going to subtract them after we're done. All right, so for the first one, we have 2, and we're going to plug in 7, and this is going to be minus 4. And again, you can plug this in a Desmos, so 2 times 7 is 14, minus 4 is going to give me an output of 10. All right, so then we have j. So we're going to do the negative on the outside, and we're going to plug in 2 inside where x was, and then squared plus 3. Now again, we can plug that into Desmos, so we're going to do the negative on the outside, 2 squared plus 3, and that gives me negative 1. Now for this one, we also have subtraction here. So if we bring that down, we're going to be saying 10 minus negative 1. So we're going to be doing 10 minus negative 1. So 10 minus negative 1, that's going to give me a final answer of 11. All right, so the only thing additional that I wanted to show you was if you are doing a problem and it has more than one variable. So like let's say I have f of x is negative 2x squared plus 3x. And I ask you to find f of negative 1. Okay, so that means that we're going to be plugging in negative 1 for the x here, but also the x here. So if you have more than one variable, make sure you plug it into each spot. So this will be negative 2, and then we're going to plug in negative 1. We're going to square that, plus 3, and then we're going to plug in negative 1 again. Remember, your input is your x, so everywhere there's an x, you plug in that number. And you can type that into Desmos, and we can do negative 2 parentheses negative 1 squared plus 3 times negative 1. And we get an output of negative 5. All right, so again, let's say I do f of 3. So we're going to do an input of 3, and everywhere I see an x, every x is going to get replaced with the number 3. So this is going to be negative 2 times 3 squared plus 3 times 3. And then we can plug that into Desmos as is. Now, I'm going to do negative 2 times 3 in parentheses, square it, plus 3 parentheses 3. And that gives me an output of negative 9.